Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
The Trump administration took some steps to defund Planned Parenthood by taking away their Title X funding and redirecting it to actual healthcare providers who don't do things like kill half their patients. But now some rogue federal judges are once again issuing federal stays of this action by the Trump administration. And now we head to the courts to duke it out. You're listening to Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. John Girardi, your host for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. RTLCC.org is the place to go if you want to learn more about us and what we do at Right to Life of Central California. Joining me, as often, the not erstwhile co-host for this week, Mr. Jonathan Keller from California Family Council.
Unerstwhile yet again.
Unearthed yet again.
Happy to be here.
Always good to have you. Glad you're here. Not re-watching the Avengers movie.
No, I've still only seen it once. But that I will probably see it at least one more time in the theater.
I'm sure.
I'm dragging my lovely wife to go see it.
Oh man, I feel like my wife should have a support group thing for your wife about having to see this movie.
But your wife is a little bit more
just Star Wars.
She's only a Star Wars nerd, not
only
on
Star
anything
Wars.
else.
And has joined me in general disappointment regarding the Disney Star Wars movies.
Yes.
All the prequel Star Wars movies.
Well,
basically, there's nothing good anymore.
Then you should be happy, John, because Avengers Endgame unseated Star Wars The Force Awakens as the #1 box office opening of all time.
Well, that's wonderful.
So when you look at those
so
charts...
glad that this movie that I will probably also find disappointing unseated another movie that I found disappointing. So... Good to know. Good to know that it unseated it.
Some of the pop culture references you may appreciate in this more because they obviously
Star
Wars
me and
doesn't
pop
really
culture.
have those.
Just love all of the pop.
That's right.
Pop culture. Anyway, well, we're not here to talk about the Avengers. Although I will say
we can if you want to. I'm down for it.
Yeah. I can tell you're chomping at the bit here. Although I will say that our recent discussion of candy on our Easter episode was proclaimed by my wife to be the best episode of Right to Life Radio ever, where we kept talking about candy throughout the course of the first segment. So maybe talking about stuff completely having nothing to do with the mission of Right to Life is really the secret of this show.
There you go.
All right, we're also gonna have a counter go up anytime I say the words that this is not a show about.
Ding.
We're gonna have a ding. We won't actually have a ding, but. Everyone keep note because I received much mockery from my family about all the times that I said, this isn't a show about and whatever.
I think, Raphael, what you need to do is a lot of radio shows, have like a soundboard with like different clips.
Yeah, with wacky sounds. We could be like Howard Stern.
Or with clips from movies or TV shows or things.
Yeah, have like Austin Powers going, yeah, baby.
But I think it should be DeForest Kelley as Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy. Just whenever you say this is not a show about... I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer.
Bricklayer or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
All right. There you go.
So let's talk about the big item in the pro-life newsosphere for the week, which is basically how we live in an oligarchy. Perhaps those of you listening to this will be surprised to hear about that. Oligarchy is a Greek word. It means rule by a few people. Oligoi is few. Archy, rule. We live in an oligarchy where there are a couple of judges who basically they can issue nationwide injunctions. Any federal district court judge can issue a nationwide injunction for any Trump administration policy that they just don't really like. And that's been happening for a number of public policy areas that are outside of the sphere of Right to Life's concern. But I almost said this is not a show about immigration. However, this has happened most recently as it relates to Title X funding. Okay, so what is Title X? Title X is a federal
often referred to as Title X incorrectly.
Yes, like Malcolm X.
Yes.
This was his program. No.
Or the iPhone X.
The iPhone X, yeah. I always call it the iPhone XR. I like calling it the iPhone X because they have the iPhone XS, and I thought that was a clever thing by Apple to subtly comment on themselves that, oh, no one actually needs these phones, therefore we're going to call this the iPhone XS because it's an excess of what you need. But I don't think they were thinking that cleverly.
The larger version of that phone, John, if you like to pile superlatives,
the XS XL.
It's the XS Max.
The XX. So bring your XS to the max.
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Anyway,
Title X.
My wife actually just got an iPhone XR, so there you go.
Oh, very nice.
I know that makes Jonathan happy.
It does.
I was constant allegiance to all things Apple.
If my wife is listening, I can now tell her, see, Holly did it. You need to get one too.
Anyway, Title 10, the federal Title 10 program, is a federal program that focuses on funding for family planning programs. And it started in the Reagan administration, and it would go to different state block grants, and then it would go to different institutions. And originally, Title 10, the way it was originally funded, it said that none of these funds should be used to fund abortion or to fund abortion providers or to fund programs that include abortion funding. Now, the problem is Planned Parenthood has still become the chief recipient of all of this title, of the vast bulk of this Title 10 money. Well, how does that work? Planned Parenthood does abortions at every single one of their locations. Well, the way they do this is through this certain legal fiction that Planned Parenthood puts together that makes a total mockery of the rules in Title 10. Basically, what Planned Parenthood says is that located within the 4 geographic walls of their clinic, there is their Title 10 clinic, which does non-abortion family planning services. And then there's their abortion clinic. Both of them happen to have the same address. Both of them have the same staff. Both of them have the same 4 walls. Both of them are located, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, Planned Parenthood has circumvented the clear intent of and the clear language of this rule. I don't like talking about legislative intent because that's kind of a fuzzy thing. I can feel like the ghost of Antonin Scalia yelling at me for talking about legislative intent.
You almost took the words out of my mouth there. I was going to make a Scalia crack.
Yeah, there you go. How does Congress have an intent? Does Congress all think the same way? Well, maybe the best way to find their intent is just to read the statute. Anyway, lawyer jokes. So, the federal Title 10 program was designed not to fund abortion, in theory, but in practice, it has funded abortion clinics for years and years and years. The George H.W. Bush administration tried to change this and made changes to these regulations controlling it, but they wound up getting overturned pretty quickly by President Clinton, although the Supreme Court ultimately upheld what the George H.W. Bush administration was trying to do. Basically, the George H.W. Bush administration was trying to put in place these rules, I think that had first been developed under Reagan and had been subject to a bunch of lawsuits, basically to say, no. You can't have your abortion clinic and your Title 10 clinic, the legal fiction of your Title 10 clinic, be located within the same 4 walls. Okay, you have to separate out. If you're going to receive Title 10 funding, you cannot do abortions on site. They have to be separate. And not only that, your Title 10 recipient clinic can't be referring for abortions, it can't be doing abortions, etc. The fact that it required that these Title 10 clinics not refer for abortions led to the pro-choice side referring to this rule as the gag rule because it forced doctors not even to talk about abortion. Oh, how dare they put this gag over the mouths of these professional healthcare providers who are going to try to, refer someone to get an abortion, blah, 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 blah. So the gag rule was this grand specter of all evil. And it was so demonized that the George W. Bush administration really didn't do anything about federal Title 10. They didn't take the steps to insist that Title 10 funding only go to people who aren't doing abortions on site. Okay, that there be separate, that the abortion clinic and the Title 10 clinic that does family planning services have to be separate both physically and financially. All right. Well, the Trump administration comes along, and to Trump's credit, this is something Trump did, that Trump attempted to do anyway, that George W. Bush did not intend to do. President Trump attempted to put in place the old Reagan-era rules, with one exception. They didn't put in place all of the rules about preventing doctors from referring for abortions. They didn't put in place this gag order, okay? But they did insist that your federal Title X clinic and your abortion clinic be actually, physically, and financially separate entities. You can't...
The horror.
Yes. So this would basically disqualify every Planned Parenthood clinic from receiving Title X funding because, for those of you who don't know, every single Planned Parenthood clinic does abortions. It used to not be the case. There used to be satellite clinics of Planned Parenthood that didn't do abortions, but now we have medication abortion.
And that's what I was going to say. The key thing that a lot of people will think is, well, wait, I thought many of these clinics, John, were not equipped
They
to
don't
perform
do surgical
procedures.
Well, abortion is not always a surgical procedure anymore. If it has those if it has those two P's on the wall, then they're doing at least medication abortions. Okay, so like there's a Planned Parenthood satellite clinic at Bullard and First. They don't do surgical abortions there. They do medication abortions. And if you don't believe me, look up the webpage for that particular clinic. It lists all their services there. Medication abortion is one of the services that they do. So this federal judge has issued this injunction stopping all of the Trump rules from going into place that would divert money away. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about why this sucks. We're going to talk about how this is going to take money away from an organization that we hold very dear, the Obria Clinics, and what they're doing to fight back, and what our hopes are going forward. You're listening to Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Right to Life Radio. This is John Girardi and Jonathan Keller.
Sweet little Michael Jackson.
Sweet little nice Michael Jackson before he became a humongous creep, as we're learning with a bit more clarity nowadays.
I will say, John, in his defense, I realize that we all believe in taking personal responsibility and encouraging others to take personal responsibility for their actions and lifestyle choices. But you have to feel a tiny bit bad for even adult Michael Jackson, because the growing up time that he had with his crazy dad and his crazy four older brothers, and
he kind of there was obviously some serious mental health issues there.
Yeah, he got kind of dealt a raw deal being made famous so early, and not really
about as sympathetic as you can possibly feel for someone who was a serial child molester. Anyway,
exactly.
Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. That was Who's Loving You Now by the Jackson 5. Thank you all so much for tuning in. All right, so I feel like I'm a little low energy on this show. I feel like I've been a little Jeb Bushy. I've been a little quiet.
Please clap.
It might be please clap. Thank you, Jonathan, for that callback to that excellent Jeb Bush event where no one was clapping for him. I don't know what it is. Maybe the time we're recording. Maybe the fact that there's a sleeping baby outside the window of the recording studio, Raphael's son. Okay. Shh. All right. Let's all be quiet. All right. So let's keep it going here. Don't want to be jebbing. I don't want to jeb this show. That's what I'm going to call it when we have a bad show. I'm going to jebbing it.
I will tell you
Jeb
something.
Exclamation.
I will tell you something I was thinking as you were talking about these Title X funds and everything.
Yes.
I was trying to think of an analogy, John, of how the left would feel if, as an example, a public school that was receiving public funds, they decided that, okay, look, we understand that, government money, it's supposed to be segregated for the purpose of educating children.
Okay.
But we also believe there's this constitutionally protected right to, own firearms. So look, this is a totally separate business. We are, yes, technically this firearms store does have, we do technically sell the firearms out of the principal's office. It's the same address, and yes, technically
within the same four walls.
Technically, it's the same staff. The teachers, in their lunch break are going and selling the AR-15s.
Yeah.
But it's totally separate, you guys.
It's totally separate.
Totally separate.
No problems whatsoever.
We're not using your money I mean, we are to buy the building and
the overhead. And,
but
costs.
I mean, technically, the guns themselves, that's a separate revenue stream.
There you go. Well, that's a nice way of thinking about it. I'm sure the left would be fine with that.
It's better than a bake sale, so come on.
Exactly. So this is basically what we're talking about with the federal Title X program. Title X is this federal program to fund family planning programs. It was established by the federal government. The language of it says that it's not supposed to pay for abortion. It's not supposed to fund abortion providers or providers, part of whose program is providing abortion services. So what does Planned Parenthood do? They create this legal fiction saying, oh, well, here's the Title X program, which is located at this address, and here's our abortion clinic, which is also at the exact same address and has the exact same staff and is within the same four walls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Trump administration is just saying, no. You can't do that. You need to we're issuing these regulations to clarify the clear text and meaning of the statute, which is that you cannot receive Title X funding if on site you're doing abortions. Okay? You just can't do that. So we're going to separate these two out. And the left is screaming bloody murder. So what has happened is, of course, as soon as this change in the regulations comes out, everyone starts suing. So Planned Parenthood starts suing, the state of California starts suing, a number of people start suing, and it goes into these federal courts. And this is the structure of the federal judiciary as it is right now. And it is frustrating to me, and I don't know that it's really what the framers of the Constitution intended, that basically one federal district court judge, and let's recall the structure of our federal court system. You have local federal district courts. You have circuit courts, which is a panel of several judges who decide appeals cases for a region of multiple states. Okay, so you have the federal district court. We in Fresno live in the Eastern District of California. They hear local cases. They hear cases that have to deal with federal law questions or interstate questions here in this Eastern District of California. Then you have the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals above us, which is an appellate court. It hears appeals from these district court cases, and it's one click below the Supreme Court. Okay, so you have Supreme Court, the numbered circuit courts, and then the federal district courts at the lowest level, right? One individual federal district court judge, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these judges all across the fruited plain. One individual federal district court judge who's hearing a case challenging a piece of federal policy, a federal regulation, a federal law that's been introduced, can issue a stay of that law going into effect that is not just effective within his district or within his circuit that he resides, it is effective across the entire country. And this is a big issue politically. It's been a big issue politically within the Trump administration, more so for a number of pieces of immigration regulation that the Trump administration has tried to put in place and enforce. But now what we're seeing this come into play with an abortion regulation or an abortion funding related regulation that the Trump administration tried to put in place. The Trump administration tried to divert this money away from abortion providers towards pro-life clinics like the Obria Group.
Well, John, but I'm sure that when the founders were writing the Constitution, they intended that any one of 400 plus federal judges should be able to overturn the duly elected president of the United States.
Yes, clearly. I mean, that's the way they when the framers of the Constitution were drafting it, they particularly I think Alexander Hamilton repeatedly said that the judiciary is definitely going to be the single most powerful of all the branches, and that's the way we want it.
That's right.
That we want to be governed by unelected, lifelong tenure possessing oligarchs who are specifically designed for their jobs not to be responsive to the will of the people. No, that is not how the framers of the Constitution thought of things.
And I know we're being tongue-in-cheek, John, but I just have to point out something.
Where else should our tongues go?
Yes.
I mean, really, your tongue is always in between your cheeks. It's kind of impossible for it to go anywhere else. All right, continue.
Fair point.
All right.
I've
just never gotten that. Anyway.
It's a good point. the thing that is crazy to me is that a lot of times you hear, in particular, certainly more so under President Trump than under President Obama, you hear discussion about President Trump is taking unprecedented actions to restrict women's reproductive health care and all this type of stuff.
There's literally precedent for it.
And he's, oh my gosh, look at, he's breaking all these norms. He's defying. Okay, let me just back up here. If you go all the way back to, I believe it was President Andrew Jackson, when the Supreme Court issued a ruling that he did not like.
He just literally ignored it.
His response was, okay, the Supreme Court has made their rule good. Now let them enforce it.
Right, exactly.
That was literally what he said.
Yeah.
So President Trump is such a conventional president that he is not only deferring to the United States Supreme Court, he is voluntarily deferring to each one of these Tom, Dick, and Harry federal judges who are choosing to thwart the will of the people through their elected representative, who is the president.
Right. And it feels like it's a structural problem that should frankly be addressed through, whether it be Supreme Court action, whether it be a constitutional amendment or something. I don't know. Really, this is kind of a problem where I am a lawyer, but this is a little over my head, these kind of complex questions about federal courts and how they should have authority. But nevertheless, it's incredibly frustrating to see this action, which is so clearly consistent with the text of the statute of Title X. It's clearly so consistent with the Constitution, but because one federal judge can come up with some cockamamie reason for believing that this that this is wrong, it's just frustrating. The idea that this is motivated by animus against women, or this is discriminatory, or blah, blah, blah. It's almost as if the legal left thinks that the Constitution has within it some decree that Planned Parenthood must always be funded now and forever and ever. We will talk about this more after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Right to Life Radio, this is Jose Feliciano with Light My Fire. This is the superior version of Light My Fire over the Doors version.
Yep.
I mean, come on. This voice. You can melt butter with this. Right to Life Radio here on Right to Life Radio. Getting a little too pro-life on this show.
Sultry.
Yes, sir. Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in. So, we've been talking about the federal Title X program and how the Trump administration has attempted to deprive Planned Parenthood of funding via the federal Title X program. Title X, again, is for family planning services, but it is also directed towards not funding providers who have abortion as part of their program of part of their care that they provide. That's explicitly in the text of the statute. So the Trump administration, sort of mimicking something that the Reagan administration tried to do, said basically, look, you cannot do this legal fiction that Planned Parenthood has been doing for several years, where Planned Parenthood has said, well, we have within these same four walls, in this same address, we have our Title X clinic, and we also have our abortion clinic. Oh, they just happen to have the same address and the same staff and the same four walls and the same everything. The Trump administration said, no, we're done with that nonsense. You can't do that. We have to separate this out. So this decision by the Trump administration, which also is allowing money to be diverted to other kinds of pro-life clinics like the Obria Group, has been stayed by a federal judge who has issued a nationwide, one federal judge in Washington state has issued a nationwide injunction preventing this change in the rules from going into effect. And basically on grounds that I find completely ridiculous. So basically, there are all these arguments that if you say that doctors can't refer for abortions or something, that this is a gag rule and this is preventing care and this is the government excessively intervening with this, which is first of all inconsistent with an actual Supreme Court case. When people are acting as though the Trump administration is engaged in unprecedented activity, there's literally a Supreme Court precedent, Rust v. Sullivan, in which the Supreme Court in 1991 upheld a much more liberal Supreme Court in 1991, I'll note, upheld the very exact thing that the Trump administration was trying to do. So somehow, though, this federal judge finds, seeing how, this is going to impact women's health in these disastrous ways, blah, 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 has basically said he's throwing out this Title X rule, and he's issuing a nationwide injunction to prevent this rule from coming into effect, demonstrating that we live not really in a constitutional republic. We live under a tyranny of a bunch of lefty federal judges who can issue these nationwide injunctions. Now, I want to tell you all a little bit about how this touches on us right here in Fresno, okay? As many of you know, we at Right to Life of Central California are trying to start a pro-life prenatal health care clinic here in the city of Fresno. It is going to be started along with our friends at the Obria Group. Obria is this nationwide chain of pro-life prenatal health care clinics, and these clinics provide basically all of the non-evil services Planned Parenthood provides and more. So
that's a good way to put it.
It's geared towards lower-income patients, and it provides them with a venue to go to where they can get full prenatal care and give them a nice, easy transition into OBGYNs from allied hospitals that are going to work with us, but have all of your prenatal healthcare services taken care of in a place that's geared towards Medi-Cal patients, that accepts Medi-Cal, and where you can get full prenatal checkups. You can get well woman exams. You can get STD, STI testing. You can have abortion pill reversal. You can have hormonal health treatment. All kinds of excellent needed services, prenatal healthcare services that are desperately needed within the Valley, and which are, the objection we get locally when we talk about how much, we dislike Planned Parenthood and how much we think they need to be defunded. The objection we get is, there's nowhere else for women to go in the Valley, and there's such a huge need for prenatal healthcare resources in Fresno. And there's some aspects of that critique that are true. There aren't very many other places that have exclusively women/prenatal healthcare services in the way Planned Parenthood does. There are lots of other clinics that provide the same services that Planned Parenthood does.
Can I say one thing, John?
Yeah, go for it.
That is such just a horrible argument overall from the left. Well, sure. But where else are they going to go?
Yeah.
Imagine that
other than this dump.
Yes. Yeah. Imagine that you move to a town and you are talking to parents, and you're like, well, I really need a place to take my children for childcare. Well, there's a pair of ex-cons that run a daycare center over here, and technically they were convicted for molestation, but they're the only healthcare, they're the only childcare center in town. The answer to that is not to say, well, what are you going to do? I guess it's the only place. No, the answer is exactly what you guys are doing. Open a new clinic. Open a new open a new child care provider. If there is something that is that bad, that it is literally harming children and harming women, the answer is not to just throw up your hands and say, I guess this is the status quo. We got to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunately what we've been at up to this point.
Right. And our goal is to say, yeah, we think Planned Parenthood's bad, and this is what we're doing as an alternative. And we're going to actually start this clinic. And we've identified a property, potentially. We've raised a bunch of the initial capital to get it started. So, this is something we're actually committed to. Now, nationally, the National Obria Group, actually the California Obria clinics, and they have a number of clinics in Southern California and the Bay Area. The Obria Group was set to receive a 3-year, $1.7 million per year grant from the federal Title X program as a result of these changes that the Trump administration was going to make, has made to the federal Title X program. Now, this is the problem. By putting in place that nationwide injunction, guess what's happened? Now that award of money to the Obria Group is in jeopardy. So I'm pleased to let you all know that Obria is going to be fighting this and has already started the process of challenging this judicial ruling in court. And I'm fearful that this is going to require the Supreme Court to step in, because this is what has happened with various Trump policies outside of the realm of abortion opinion. Is they go to some federal judge within the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the judges within the Ninth Circuit are, just by happenstance of who happens to die and who happens to retire during Democrat administrations, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is stacked with left-wing judges, both at the district court level and at the level of the circuit. It is overwhelmingly left-wing. So what happens is these left-wing West Coast states, or these left-wing causes, they know to file their cases in various district courts throughout the western United States under the Ninth Circuit. They'll probably get a left-wing district court judge who will rule in their favor, and then they'll probably get the left-wing Ninth Circuit to uphold that prior terrible ruling. And it's going to require the U.S. Supreme Court to come in and resolve the situation, and that could take years. So it's such an unfortunate thing. I think what the left is trying to do with this and other ways is, well, President Trump won his election. We can't stop him from trying to make these regulations, but what we can do is try to delay things until 2020. And in 2020, there will be another election, and maybe we'll kick President Trump out, and we can reverse all of these regulations that the Trump administration has tried to put in place.
Run out the clock.
Run out the clock. I think that's precisely what is happening with this policy. And it's the same thing that many on the left have tried to do with immigration policies. Obviously, that's different. This is not an immigration show. Ding. But that's what they're trying to do with these abortion policies. All right. When we come back, we will have more on this story and more pro-life news. You're listening to Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. We're going to talk about Perinatal Hospice, what to learn about it, and issues surrounding it. I couldn't believe that this was the Hollies when I read it. I mean, I'd heard this song for years and years, but I didn't realize it was them.
Who are the Hollies?
The Hollies did like they were a British invasion band, and they did this song, Under My Umbrella, bust off what she said. Anyway, this song sounds much more American and Southern and is not as... Anyway, whatever. The Hollies here on Right to Life Radio. Long, cool woman in a black dress. Thank you so much for tuning in. RTLCC.org is the place to be. A big thank you to everyone who came out earlier this week for our open house here at Right to Life of Central California. Basically, we decided to set out a bunch of our literature and try to get people to sign up to be volunteers for various things. So thank you for everyone who fell for our ploy. You have now, we have you.
I do love the new Obria booth banner and everything.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We'll have that out at our Fresno Fair booth and other things. So be sure to check that out. All right. Speaking of our open house, at our open house earlier this week, a young lady came in, a pregnant young lady came in with her mom. I'm not going to use their names or anything on the show, but I do want to talk about the issue they raised because I think it's really important. And this might be a legislative effort that we join in with, along with other pro-life organizations throughout the state, to try to actually, so much we talk about on this show, fighting against bad pieces of legislation in the California legislature, and it's kind of where fighting the long defeat that basically so many pro-choice lefties are dominating our state legislature, and it just feels like all we're doing is fighting back against this inexorable tidal wave that's just assaulting us again and again and again.
I recognize that deep-cut Lord of the Rings reference. Very impressive.
There you go. So. There you go. Fighting the long defeat.
That's right.
At any rate, I have come up with a topic that I think could result in those of us in the pro-life movement in California actually introducing some good legislation that could actually help people and save lives and actually possibly get bipartisan support. So this young lady came in along with her mom into our office, and she was an adult, not a teenager or anything. This young woman came in, and she was pregnant, and she was telling me that her child had been diagnosed with anencephaly, and that the child was unlikely to live outside of the womb after birth for very long. She told me that when she received this diagnosis, her OB immediately urged her to have an abortion. And all of the only options she was provided right then and there were abortion. And actually, she was sort of urged, within 48 hours, you need to make up your mind to do this. I think because of where she was in the pregnancy, if she waited much longer, she would, as Jonathan has literally 3 screens open at the same time.
Keep on.
Keep moving right along. That she would, basically, she was at a point in the pregnancy where if she waited too long, it would require a much more complicated abortion procedure. So she felt really bullied and really pressured and had actually scheduled an appointment to have the abortion, only to stop and change her mind, and received a ton of flack from her doctor. At first, her doctor tried to drop her as a patient. I think some intervention came, and the doctor put her back on, and she doesn't feel like she's getting great care from this doctor now. And
what? It's medical blackmail.
Yeah, practically. Yeah, but yes, very much so. I think the way that she's being treated, because she's decided, no, I want to go through this legitimate process of perinatal hospice. I want to deliver my baby. I don't want to actively, engage in the killing of my baby. And she's receiving all of this, crap from her doctor over it. It's really disgusting. It's really disgusting. It's really horrible and disgusting. Now, I have some friends from Notre Dame who worked with Indiana Right to Life. Shout out to Indiana Right to Life. Do a lot of good work. Indiana Right to Life is one of those pro-life organizations I'd love us to be someday, Jonathan, where they're the big boys at the Capitol, and they have the power at their state capitol that Planned Parenthood has at our state capitol.
One of the things when I was here at Right to Life, I said it was like a 10 or a 20-year goal, but it would be to drop the central from the name of the organization
and just be Right to Life of California. Hey, maybe someday.
You never know.
You never know. Just gotta wait for gotta wait for some for some spots to open up.
That's right.
Anyway, moving right along before I say something mean. So, Indiana Right to Life introduced and passed this legislation to require that any parent who receives a fatal prenatal diagnosis, any mother who receives a fatal prenatal diagnosis, receive information about perinatal hospice. It doesn't restrict abortion in any way. It doesn't restrict abortion access in any way. It doesn't turn people away from abortion in any way. All it does is you provide someone with information about perinatal hospice. When you do that for parents, when you actually provide them with information, it makes them likely, it makes them 75% likely not to abort their child, which is a huge change from if you do it otherwise. And especially the thing this young lady was sharing with me the other day at the open house was, I feel like I'm atypical because I was pressured, I was pushed, I chose life anyway. In spite of that, I looked out for other alternatives and I found something, even though everyone was being mean to me, everyone was pushing me one way. I'm sure for every one good story like hers, and it's only relatively good, I mean, only in the sense that she's keeping the baby. Every other aspect of her story sounds like it's been horrible and that she's been treated like crap. But she is atypical. Probably for every one good story like hers, there are multiple stories of people who give in to that pressure and who feel like they don't have any other option and are just pushed into having an abortion. And what?
And that is the opposite of pro-choice. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Medically coercing someone,
or at least pressuring.
Yes, under the very real threat of denial of care.
Right. And to present to someone this very limited universe of options where the first thing out of your mouth is, oh, we need to abort this baby. The first, you're not giving them information about this alternative, only sort of showing them one path and then putting like a time clock to pressure you like, okay, you got to make this decision like in 48 hours, otherwise blah, blah, blah. And then putting them under threat of dropping them from care. It's really bad. And I think it's something where even pro-choice people of goodwill can recognize that if you're honestly pro-choice, like this is not a good situation. Like this is not what choice is about. Choice is about having all your options available to you and being able to pick them freely. not having one path given to you and only feeling like that's the only path you can take. So we at Right to Life are going to try to work with some friendly local state legislators to try to introduce legislation, at the very least, to provide patients in that situation with information about perinatal hospice. And I think all of us listening to this should know about it. Now, there aren't very many programs for perinatal hospice in Fresno. Hines Hospice has a program like that. It's called Angel Babies, which is perhaps something to check out. I've had certain other questions about other aspects of Hines Hospice, so this is not a wholesale endorsement. But Hines Hospice does have this Angel Babies perinatal hospice program. And if you know someone who has a situation like that, particularly in the Fresno area, please do get in touch with us at Right to Life, and please do get in touch with our friend Dr. Amy Holmes and her gynecology practice, and try to get in touch with someone who will help you through the process of having the baby, grieving the loss of your baby, providing the baby with comfort care after his or her birth. That is the answer to a diagnosis like that, not actively killing the baby. That is not the answer to this question. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for us this week, as we're joined by Mr. Dino Martin with Sway. The best music in the greater Fresno area radio market and perhaps the world. Thank you all so much for tuning in, folks. We will be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Adios. God love you. This is John Girardi with Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400.